For decades, Chuck Norris built a reputation as the most fearless man in Hollywood, the only actor who didn't need stunt doubles, who did his own fights, and who carried a quiet strength both on and off screen. Fans loved him for his discipline, his calm attitude, and the way he stayed away from Hollywood drama. But what most people never knew is that behind the cameras, Chuck Norris had a private list, a list of actors he refused to work with ever again. Not because of ego, not because of jealousy, but because they crossed a line he never forgave. Chuck wasn't like other stars who traded public insults or tweeted grudges for attention. When Chuck Norris decided someone was done, he didn't argue with them. He simply cut them out of his career permanently. And the 4 actors on that list weren't chosen by accident. Each one did something that violated the single rule Norris lived by since the day he entered the film industry. Respect matters more than fame. One actor tried to replace him behind his back. One mocked him publicly to boost their own career. One dismissed martial arts as fake movie tricks. And one was a close friend. Until betrayal changed everything. Hollywood insiders whispered about it for years, but Chuck never confirmed anything. Until now. Because for the first time, the truth is finally coming out. Who these 4 actors were, what exactly they did, and why Chuck Norris, a man known for patience, discipline, and honor, walked away from them forever. And once you hear the stories, you'll understand why Chuck didn't just dislike them. He never trusted them again. When Chuck Norris first entered Hollywood, he wasn't treated like a movie star. He was treated like an outsider, a real martial artist stepping into a world of choreographed punches and staged fights. But Chuck wasn't interested in pretending. He didn't take roles to look tough. He took roles to be tough. He didn't come from acting schools or celebrity families. He came from a world where respect was earned through discipline, not attitude. And because of that, very early in his career, he started noticing which actors were professionals and which ones were just pretending. The first major clash happened in the late 1970s when Chuck was offered a role in a film that already had a big-name actor attached. Studio executives thought it would be a perfect action duo, a rising martial arts star next to a well-known Hollywood face. On paper, it looked like an unstoppable pairing, but behind the scenes, it fell apart before the cameras ever rolled. The reason? The lead actor didn't want Chuck in the movie at all. He thought Norris would overshadow him and made it clear that he wasn't interested in sharing the spotlight. He complained to the studio, he demanded rewrites, and he even tried to convince producers that Norris wasn't real acting talent. Chuck found out, not through the studio, but through a stunt coordinator who overheard the conversation. And once Chuck learned the truth, he never confronted the actor. He simply walked away from the movie without a single argument. That small decision cost the other actor the role, because without Chuck, the studio canceled the project entirely. For Chuck, it wasn't about winning. It was about setting a line. If someone tries to silence you before you even speak, they don't deserve to stand beside you. That actor became the first name on Chuck's private list. Not because of personality, but because of dishonesty. And from that moment on, Chuck learned something he never forgot. In Hollywood, some people protect their ego harder than they protect their integrity. The second actor who landed on the list was different. This time, the disrespect was public. When Chuck Norris facts became a massive global meme in the 2000s, millions of people joked about Chuck's strength, power, and toughness. Most of the world thought Chuck was in on the joke, but one comedian took it way too far. During live shows and interviews, he didn't just make fun of the meme, he started mocking Norris's real martial arts background, claiming it was exaggerated and no different from movie choreography. When Chuck heard the clip, he didn't laugh, and he didn't respond publicly. He just told someone close to him, "There's a difference between humor and humiliation. One builds, the other destroys." That comedian never worked with Chuck again. In fact, any studio project that even mentioned his name was turned down immediately. No discussion, no negotiation. Chuck didn't need revenge. He just removed the person from his world completely, but the story doesn't end with public insults or career sabotage. Because the third and fourth names on Chuck's list were people he once respected, including one who called him a mentor, and that is where things get personal. The third actor who ended up on Chuck Norris's list was someone Hollywood expected him to admire, a worldwide box office star, a man known for explosive action movies, and someone studios tried again and again to pair with Chuck for a dream crossover. On paper, it was a perfect idea. Two icons, one film, massive ticket sales. But Chuck rejected every offer, every time. And it wasn't because of salary, contracts, or screen time. It was because of one sentence the actor said in an interview. A sentence that Chuck never forgot. During a press tour, the actor was asked about working with real martial artists instead of stunt performers. He laughed and said, "Martial arts look great on camera, but real acting takes more than just kicking people." He didn't mention Chuck's name, but everyone knew who the comment was aimed at. The man who brought real fighting into cinema long before Hollywood turned it into a choreography routine. The actor's tone wasn't playful, it was dismissive, like martial arts was just a cheap shortcut to fame. And for Chuck, that wasn't just an insult. It was ignorance. Instead of responding, Chuck quietly refused every film that included the actor, even when studios offered him contracts in the 8-figure range. One producer later said, "When Chuck says no, there is no second conversation." That was the moment Hollywood realized something. Chuck Norris didn't need to fight anyone to win. Sometimes, the strongest move is not stepping onto the battlefield at all. But the fourth and final name on Chuck's list wasn't a rival, or an egotistical actor, or a comedian looking for attention. It was a friend, someone Chuck trained with, supported, and helped rise in the industry. Someone who called Chuck a brother in public interviews, and then slowly turned his back on him the moment success arrived. At first, Chuck ignored the distance. He assumed it was fame, pressure, or studio demands. But when that actor began retelling stories from their early days, changing details, removing Chuck's name, and taking full credit for training, contacts, and breakthroughs, Chuck finally understood. This wasn't distance, it was erasure. He never confronted the man. He never attacked him. He just let silence do what anger never could. And that silence lasted decades. People close to Chuck say it was the only time they saw him disappointed instead of angry. Because betrayal isn't loud, it's quiet. It comes from someone close enough to shake your hand while letting go of your name. And that's why the fourth person on the list wasn't just someone Chuck refused to work with. It was someone Chuck would never trust again. But there's one part nobody expected. While Chuck had a private list of the 4 actors he would never work with, he also had the opposite list, actors he admired, even when the media tried to turn them into enemies. And one of those names is the most surprising of all. Hollywood spent years creating a rivalry between 2 legends. But behind closed doors, Chuck Norris called that man the most disciplined actor I ever knew. That truth is coming next, and it flips the entire story upside down. Hollywood always tried to create rivalries, especially in the world of action cinema. If one actor was rising, the media wanted another one to challenge him. If a new martial arts superstar appeared, they immediately asked, who would win in a real fight? And Chuck Norris was no exception. Journalists, tabloids, and talk shows spent years trying to turn him against another cinematic legend, the one man they claimed was his ultimate competitor, the only name that made headlines beside his. That man was Bruce Lee. To the public, they were competitors. To Hollywood, they were marketable opposites. To fans, they were 2 warriors battling for the same crown. But behind the cameras, the truth was the complete opposite. Chuck Norris didn't just respect Bruce Lee, he admired him. Not because of fame, not because of myth, but because of discipline. When Chuck was asked years later why he never responded to who would win in a fight, you or Bruce, he simply said, "The world didn't lose a fight when Bruce died. It lost a thinker." That single line revealed something nobody expected. Chuck never felt competitive with Bruce because he never saw him as an opponent. He saw him as a teacher, even when they stood on opposite sides of the camera. During the filming of Way of the Dragon, They didn't rehearse to look impressive. They trained like athletes, planned like strategists, and built their fight scene like two men creating a physical conversation, not a staged brawl. Directors told Chuck to slow down because the kicks were too fast for the camera. Bruce laughed and said, "Then tell the cameras to keep up." That moment wasn't about ego. It was about raising the standard. And for Chuck, that was the key difference between Bruce and the actors on his private blacklist. Bruce respected the craft. He respected the crew. He respected the body, the mind, the discipline. There were no shortcuts, no fake stories, no staged arrogance. While the four actors Chuck refused to work with had one thing in common: they thought fame was bigger than the craft. Bruce Lee was the opposite. He believed the craft was bigger than the fame. And that's why Chuck never allowed Hollywood to use him in who was better debates, because that question was always built on competition. And Chuck valued legacy more than competition. He once said privately, "Bruce didn't just make martial arts mainstream, he made people respect the philosophy behind it." And that's the real twist in this story. Chuck Norris never publicly revealed the four actors he refused to work with. But he openly admitted the names of the men he respected the most. Bruce Lee was one of them, and there was another, a man Chuck called a gentleman in a world full of egos, someone nobody expected to be on his admiration list. Because before Hollywood turned action stars into icons, before stunt doubles replaced real discipline, before franchises replaced philosophy, there were only a few men who treated martial arts like a responsibility, not a performance, and Chuck never forgot who they were. The final part of the story will reveal the most emotional piece of all: why Chuck Norris never exposed the four actors publicly, and why silence was his final act of power. For years, people wondered why Chuck Norris never exposed the names of the four actors he refused to work with. Hollywood loves drama, careers built on feuds, interviews built on insults, and headlines built on scandals. Any other celebrity might have turned the list into a book deal, a talk show moment, or a revenge story. But Chuck Norris chose something completely different. He chose silence. And to understand why, you have to look at the way Chuck lived long before the fame. He was raised in discipline, shaped by the military, and trained in martial arts not for trophies, but for control. Real strength, to him, wasn't about proving who you can defeat. It was about proving who you don't need to fight. That's why when an actor betrayed him, mocked him, undermined him, or tried to erase his influence, Chuck didn't attack. He didn't post a response. He didn't sit down for a tell-all interview. He simply removed himself from their world. Because in Chuck's mind, the real punishment wasn't embarrassment. It was irrelevance. If he refused to speak your name, you no longer existed in his story. That's why the blacklist stayed private. Not because Chuck was hiding something, but because he believed the worst thing he could do to those actors was give them nothing. No attention, no spotlight, no publicity, not even negative publicity. One producer once said, "Chuck doesn't seek revenge. He just makes sure the door is locked forever." But what people often overlook is the other side of the story. The list of actors Chuck did admire, because they lived by the same principles he did. Bruce Lee was one. But the second name surprised everyone: Steve McQueen. Before McQueen was the king of cool, he was a struggling actor taking martial arts lessons from Chuck in a small California dojo. They traded knowledge. Chuck taught McQueen self-defense, and McQueen taught Chuck how Hollywood worked. There was no jealousy, no ego, no competition. Just two men who respected each other's craft. Years later, McQueen was the one who told Chuck, Hollywood doesn't need more actors. It needs more men who don't break under pressure. And that single sentence became the filter Chuck used his entire career. The filter that decided who stayed in his circle and who got cut from it. That's why the four actors on Chuck's hate list never got a second chance. Because in the end, Chuck didn't care how famous a person was. He cared how honorable they were. One actor lied, one mocked him, one underestimated the art he spent a lifetime mastering, and one betrayed a friendship that was supposed to be permanent. Chuck never needed revenge. He only needed distance, and that is the final truth. Sometimes, the most powerful move isn't to fight back. It's to walk away so quietly that the other person spends the rest of their life realizing what they lost. Chuck Norris didn't hate those 4 actors because they hurt his image. He hated them because they violated the only thing he never compromised, respect. And in Hollywood, where ego is louder than honor, that kind of silence isn't weakness, it's dominance.